Eleanor Gray hurried along the path leading to her parents' house. The cold autumn wind tousled her hair and made the wrapping paper of the gift in her hand flutter slightly. Today was Walter and Martha's 45th wedding anniversary party. An unexpected detour due to road construction had taken more time than expected, and she was already 30 minutes late. When she arrived at the impressive two-story white colonial-style house, she could hear cheerful conversation and laughter coming from inside. Eleanor took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. Martha, her mother, opened the door. The smile on her face disappeared the moment she saw Eleanor. "So you finally showed up," Martha looked at her watch and pursed her lips. "Late on such an important day. Everyone has already started eating." "I'm sorry, Mom. There was road construction." "I don't want to hear excuses." Martha turned her back and began walking toward the living room. "Hang your coat in the closet and hurry up." Eleanor quietly took off her coat and carefully readjusted her gift. When she entered the living room, it was full of relatives and her parents' friends. Most people didn't notice Eleanor, but she was used to that. "Big sister. You finally made it." Brittany's high-pitched voice echoed from across the room. With perfect makeup and a new designer dress, she stood in the center of the room like a model. Everyone was worried. "But I told them, that's just Eleanor for you." Eleanor chose to ignore the snide remark hidden in those words. "Congratulations, Dad, Mom." Eleanor approached her parents and held out her package. "Happy anniversary, truly." Walter was a tall man with a stern expression. He simply nodded briefly without looking Eleanor in the eye. "Brittany gave us a beautiful glass vase," Walter finally spoke. "It's displayed over there." "Magnificent, isn't it?" Eleanor turned around and saw indeed an exquisite crystal vase filled with premium roses. Her small package suddenly felt cheap. Martha opened Eleanor's gift and took out a hand-knitted shawl. It was something Eleanor had spent weeks knitting late into the night. "Well?" Martha didn't even try to hide her disappointment as she held the shawl. "This doesn't suit me at all. Such an old-fashioned design, it makes me look like a grandmother. I knitted it in your favorite color." Eleanor's voice grew smaller. "I don't need this." Martha tossed the shawl onto the sofa. "Brittany, your friend has arrived. Go introduce her." Brittany took her mother's arm with a beaming smile, and the two walked away together. Eleanor was left standing there alone. "Let's take a photo," the party planner announced. "Everyone in the Gray family, please come over here." As relatives began gathering in front of the fireplace, Eleanor approached, but Walter stopped her with his hand. "Eleanor, could you stand more toward the edge? You're too tall to be in the center." In reality, Brittany was about 2 centimeters taller. Eleanor silently moved to where she was told. "Now, everyone, I have an announcement." Walter stood up with a champagne glass in his hand. "Our daughter, Brittany, has been promoted to vice president at Northeastern Marketing." Applause and congratulations erupted. Brittany smiled happily and rested her head on her father's shoulder. Eleanor remembered that just last week, she had been made partner at her accounting firm. When she shared the news over the phone, her father had merely said, I see." As the party progressed, Eleanor moved to a corner of the room with a wine glass in her hand. Relatives passing by behaved as if she were invisible. It had always been this way since she was little. At Christmas, while Brittany opened mountains of presents, Eleanor's gifts were always few and practical. For school events, her parents would sit in the front row and enthusiastically applaud Brittany's performances, but for Eleanor's piano recitals, they were too busy with work to attend. Eleanor stared at the hand-knitted shawl abandoned on the sofa. The pain of knowing that no one understood the thought she had put into every stitch cut deep into her heart. She set down her glass, retrieved her coat without anyone noticing, and quietly left the house. "Eleanor, the client was full of praise for you. Thanks to you, the Williams Group audit was completed perfectly." Barbara Cohen placed her hand on Eleanor's shoulder. She was the senior partner at Austin Accounting Partners and the person who had recruited Eleanor to the firm. From the large office window, Boston's impressive skyline spread out before them. "Thank you," Eleanor smiled. "It's the result of the team's efforts." "So modest," Barbara laughed. "But we all know the truth. Without you, that project wouldn't have succeeded. Talented accountants like you are rare. Your family must be so proud." Eleanor gave a wry smile. "Yes, well." Barbara didn't say anything, but her expression suggested she'd sensed something. She changed the topic and began discussing the next project. Eleanor took the opportunity to excuse herself. Back in her office, she watered the small plant on her desk. It was a gift from her colleagues to celebrate her promotion. There had been nothing from her family. When Eleanor shared the news of her promotion, her father had her mother tell her, "I'll call you back later because I have an important call." That later never came. Eleanor's smartphone rang, and she looked at the screen. It was a group message from Brittany. "Everyone. We're having our engagement party on the 5th of next month. I want you all to meet Mark. It's just for family and close friends." Eleanor checked her calendar. She was free that day. As she began to reply, another message came through. There was a photo attached showing her parents, Brittany, and what appeared to be her fiancé. The caption read, "Family photo. All set." Eleanor took a deep breath. Should she confirm if she was actually invited? As she hesitated, yet another message arrived. "Eleanor, can you make it? There's someone among Mark's friends I'd like to introduce you to." At least she was invited. Eleanor replied briefly, "Thanks, I'll be there," and put down her phone. Looking out the window, she noticed the sky had begun to darken. The following weekend, Eleanor came down with the flu. She was bedridden for about a week with a high fever and headaches, and her doctor ordered her to rest at home. She informed her parents of her condition by phone, but only her colleagues from work came to check on her. Brittany sent her tickets to a fashion show with a message, "Get well soon. I can't go to this anymore, so if you'd like." Looking at the date, Eleanor realized it was for a time when she would still be recovering. After recovering, Eleanor called her parents' house. Martha answered the phone. "Oh, Eleanor. You're feeling better?" "Yes, finally." "Is Dad there?" "He's out golfing with friends today. This weekend, we're going shopping for Brittany's engagement party. Would you like to come?" "I haven't decided what to wear to the party yet, so it would be nice to look together." There was a moment of silence. "Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to New York. Just Brittany and me. We need some mother-daughter time, you understand." Eleanor bit her lip. "Of course. Have fun." On the day of the engagement party, Eleanor wore a new dress and carefully applied her makeup. She wore Brittany's favorite brand of perfume and framed a photo of the two of them as a gift. When she arrived at her parents' house, there was a sign on the door that read, "Gray Robinson Family Gathering." She was greeted at the entrance by an unfamiliar waiter. "Your name, please," he asked, holding a small list. "Eleanor Gray. I'm the bride's sister." The waiter checked his list and nodded. "This way, please. General guest seating is on the right." Eleanor stopped. "General guests?" "Yes, the family seating is in the VIP area on the left," the waiter explained expressionlessly. Eleanor quietly headed to the seats on the right. At the table sat Brittany's colleagues and people Eleanor barely knew. Throughout the ceremony, she could hear the laughter of her parents and sister coming from the VIP area. 2 weeks later, Eleanor visited her parents' house with a homemade apple pie for her father's birthday. When her father opened the door, he looked surprised. "Eleanor? I didn't know you were coming today." "It's your birthday, so I wanted to surprise you." Eleanor held out the pie. "I baked your favorite." Walter looked at his watch. "I have an important appointment today. I was just about to go out." From behind the door, Martha's voice could be heard. Who is it, Walter? It's Eleanor. Oh, Martha appeared. She was wearing an elegant dress. We're having dinner with the Robinsons today. Mark's parents. Didn't you remember? Eleanor hadn't heard anything about it. She swallowed her words and smiled. That's all right. I'm sorry to intrude. Have a good time. Eleanor, Martha said, seeming a bit uncomfortable. You make us uneasy, you know? Yes, Eleanor answered quietly. I know. Several months later, Eleanor's grandmother, her only ally, passed away. On the day of the funeral, she sat in the front row. Her parents and Brittany were beside her, but they behaved as if she didn't exist. After the service, as mourners gathered, Eleanor was speaking with her grandmother's old friends. What's your relationship to Ethel Gray? An elderly woman asked. I'm her granddaughter. Oh, I didn't know. We were only introduced to that girl, the woman pointed at Brittany. A week after the funeral, Eleanor received a call from her grandmother's lawyer. Ms. Eleanor Gray, I need to meet with you urgently regarding the execution of your grandmother's will. Her will. But I was told she didn't leave anything. Is that so? The lawyer's voice had a strange tone. Could you please tell me when you're available to meet? Eleanor made an appointment, wondering what this was about. On Christmas morning, snow covered the upscale suburban neighborhood of Boston. Warm light spilled from the windows of the Gray mansion, and a large wreath adorned the front door. Inside, a gigantic Christmas tree reigned in the corner of the living room, with colorful packages piled beneath it. Eleanor took a deep breath before entering the living room. 2 weeks had passed since her meeting with her grandmother's lawyer. What she had learned that day had turned her long-simmering doubts into certainty. However, she had not yet made her decision. Today, on Christmas, she intended to find her answer. Good morning, Eleanor. You finally came. Martha was wearing a new cashmere robe and holding a coffee cup. Her voice lacked the usual superficial cordiality. Good morning, Mom, Eleanor greeted quietly. Merry Christmas. In the living room, Walter was already sitting in his favorite leather sofa, reading the newspaper. He simply nodded briefly without looking up. The fire in the fireplace crackled, giving warmth to the room. Eleanor. Merry Christmas. Brittany entered the room accompanied by her husband, Mark. She was dressed in perfect makeup and new silk pajamas, greeting with a bright voice. But there was something calculated in her tone. Eleanor sat down at the edge of the sofa. The scent of Brittany's perfume as she walked by felt oddly irritating. Now, let's open the presents. Martha announced. Walter first. They took turns opening gifts. Walter received an expensive watch from Brittany and a set of golf clubs from Martha. Martha squealed with delight at the Hermes scarf from Brittany and beamed at the diamond earrings from Walter. When it was Brittany's turn, she opened luxury spa invitations from her parents and a small jewelry box from Mark. Inside was a necklace with a large diamond. Oh, it's beautiful. Brittany exclaimed excitedly and kissed Mark. While the whole room was filled with her joy, Eleanor sat quietly. And for Eleanor, Martha took out a box from under the tree. It was a small, elegantly wrapped box. This is from all of us. Eleanor received the box and carefully untied the ribbon. Deep down, she was hoping for something. Maybe her suspicions were wrong. Maybe this family did love her. But the box was empty. Eleanor stared at the box, then looked up at her family. After a moment of silence, Brittany couldn't suppress her laughter. We have nothing to give you, she said, laughing. What were you expecting? Martha also let out a small laugh. There's nothing to give a child like you. Walter pretended indifference, not looking up from his newspaper, but a thin smile played on his lips. Eleanor placed the empty box on her lap. Something inside her chest became hard and cold. For a long time, she had tried to be a part of this family. But now, she was finally ready to accept the truth. Actually, I have a gift for you too, Eleanor said quietly. She took a red envelope from her handbag and slowly placed it under the Christmas tree. There was a moment's pause, and tension filled the room. What's this? Brittany asked, furrowing her brow. Why don't you open it and see? Eleanor's voice was quiet but firm. Martha hesitantly picked up the envelope and handed it to her husband. You open it. Walter put down his newspaper with annoyance and took the envelope. What is this? He opened the seal and took out the documents. Just glancing at the first page, the color drained from his face. As he looked at the second and third pages, his hands began to shake, and his face turned red with anger. Where did you get these? He suddenly stood up and rushed toward Eleanor. Then he slapped her hard across the cheek. The sound of the slap echoed in the room, and Eleanor's head was jerked to the side by the impact. But she neither stood up nor backed away. She simply looked at Walter quietly. There was a red mark on her cheek, and tears glistened in her eyes, but her expression was filled with determination. The air in the room froze. Dad. What are you doing? Brittany's voice was confused. Calm down, Martha grabbed Walter's arm, but her own face had gone pale with fear. Eleanor, what is this? What does this mean? I thought you had the right to know, Eleanor replied quietly. Who I am, and what you've done to me. What's going on? Brittany asked, increasingly confused. She picked up some of the documents that had fallen from her father's hand. There were old photographs attached. A young couple. The woman clearly resembled Eleanor. Dad, this is... We never intended to show you, Martha's voice was trembling. She stared at Eleanor. We never meant for you to know. Everyone would have been happier that way. Happy? Eleanor's voice was quiet, but her words were filled with anger. You oppress me, lie to me, steal my rights, and you call that a happy? Walter shook his head violently. You can't prove anything. These documents are fabricated. Do you really think so? Eleanor had regained her composure. They were left by grandmother. She knew everything. And she had been collecting evidence for me. Grandma did. Brittany looked up from the photos. But why? If you want to know the truth, read everything, Eleanor pointed to the envelope under the tree. I'm leaving now. I need time to decide. But let me say this. She looked at each of their faces. This is not what a real family is. Eleanor picked up her coat and, standing up straight, left the room. Before closing the door, she looked back one last time. In the living room, Brittany was desperately reading the scattered documents. Martha had collapsed into a chair, covering her face with her hands. And Walter stood frozen, seemingly at a loss for words for the first time in his life. Eleanor stood by the window of her hotel room, looking down at the snow-covered streets of Boston. A week had passed since the Christmas Day incident. Dozens of unread messages and missed calls remained on her cell phone, but she hadn't responded to any of them. A knock on the door made Eleanor turn around. Who is it? It's me, Brittany. After a moment's hesitation, Eleanor opened the door. Brittany stood there with a tired expression. She wasn't wearing her usual perfect makeup or hairstyle, and she had dark circles under her eyes. May I come in? Eleanor silently stepped aside and invited her into the room. How did you find me? Eleanor asked as she closed the door. I asked grandmother's lawyer. Brittany stopped in the middle of the room and stared at her sister. I thought we needed to talk. Eleanor nodded and pointed to the chair by the window. Sit down. They sat facing each other. Silence filled the room. Is everything written in those documents true? Brittany finally spoke. Yes, Eleanor answered quietly. The lawyer confirmed it. Including the DNA test results. Brittany exhaled deeply. So you were actually a cousin? The daughter of Dad's brother. Jonathan Gray's daughter, Eleanor completed. He was Walter's brother and co-founder of Gray Real Estate. But I always heard that Uncle Jonathan died in an accident while single. That was a lie. Eleanor's voice was calm, but anger lurked beneath it. Jonathan Gray was married. His wife's name was Caroline. When I was 4 years old, they both died in a car accident. And my kind uncle and aunt took me in. Tears welled up in Brittany's eyes. But why? Why didn't they tell us the truth? You really didn't know? Eleanor asked curiously. Of course not. If I had known, I wouldn't have treated you that way. Eleanor carefully studied Brittany's face. Her anger and confusion seemed genuine. According to grandmother's letter, the parents. I mean, Walter and Martha have known the truth since you were about 10 years old. So I thought you would have found out eventually. Brittany shook her head vigorously. I didn't know. They never told me anything. I see. Eleanor exhaled deeply. Then let me explain what was in the envelope. She spread several documents on the table. The first photograph showed a young man who resembled Walter. This is my real father, Jonathan Gray. He was 2 years younger than Walter, and the two of them founded Gray Real Estate. Initially as equal partners. The next document was an old contract. As the company began to gain momentum, Jonathan started exploring new directions. Environmentally friendly housing development. It was too innovative an idea for that time. Walter opposed it, and the two began to clash. Eleanor pointed to the next document. It was a legal document. Walter was working behind Jonathan's back. While my father was away on a business trip, Walter forged Jonathan's signature to transfer his shares of the company to himself. According to grandmother's investigation, it was clearly fraud. Brittany took the documents with trembling hands. But why didn't Grandma say anything back then? She didn't know at first either. Later she began to suspect, but lacked evidence. She only started a full investigation after I entered college. Eleanor took a deep breath and continued. When Jonathan discovered the truth, he tried to fight through legal means. But just as he was about to, that accident happened. The accident. The color drained from Brittany's face. Surely father didn't. There's no evidence to prove that, Eleanor said calmly. Grandmother didn't go that far either. She merely pointed out that the timing was suspicious. The next document was adoption papers. After my parents died, Walter and Martha took me in. But it wasn't out of love, it was to secure Jonathan's inheritance. I had the right to inherit my father's property. Through adoption, they became the guardians of my assets. And that property? It was all absorbed into the company. A small amount was put in trust for my college education, but the rest Walter embezzled under the name of the investments. According to grandmother's investigation, about half the value of Gray Real Estate legally belongs to me. Brittany was stunned. So that's why they treated you that way? To steal your inheritance? I think so, Eleanor answered quietly. My very existence is evidence of their crime. That's why they constantly pushed me aside, undermined my confidence, and tried to exclude me from the family. They wanted me to have no interest in the company, to believe I had no business talent. But you've succeeded as an accountant. Yes, Eleanor smiled thinly. Ironically, I seem to have inherited my father's talent with numbers. Grandmother always encouraged me. She was the only one who truly loved me. Brittany stood up and walked to the window. Her shoulders were trembling slightly. I didn't know, she turned around, her face wet with tears. But that's no excuse. I treated you terribly. As a sister, as a human being, it's unforgivable. Eleanor silently stared at her. What are you going to do now? Brittany finally asked. I'm discussing it with my lawyer. Honestly, I haven't decided yet. Will you sue them? That's one option. That would destroy the family. Brittany's voice was trembling. Brittany, Eleanor's voice was soft but resolute. We were never a real family. What Walter and Martha created was a false family built on lies and exploitation. But we might be able to fix it from now on. Let them talk, let them apologize. They won't apologize, Eleanor shook her head. Walter will never admit he was wrong. Neither will Martha. They've feared the truth coming to light for decades. They won't sincerely repent now. I'm different, Brittany pleaded. I can change. I want to start over with you. Eleanor stared at her sister for a long time. There was sincerity there. But wounds accumulated over decades don't heal instantly. It will take time, she finally said. But maybe we can move forward, one step at a time. Brittany nodded and wiped away her tears. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. Even if it means putting our parents on trial. Eleanor smiled genuinely for the first time. Thank you. Outside the window, snow continued to fall silently. With the beginning of the new year, the truth was about to be fully revealed. Gray real estate fraud case, former president found guilty. Eleanor quietly gazed at the newspaper headline visible from her office window. The trial had lasted 8 months and attracted attention throughout Boston. Walter Gray was found guilty of fraud and embezzlement, and received a suspended sentence. His advanced age and health condition had been taken into consideration. However, the social sanctions were severe. Gray real estate's stock price plummeted, and long-standing clients terminated their contracts one after another. Martha claimed she knew nothing about her husband's actions, but during the trial, she too was identified as an accomplice to fraud. She also received a suspended sentence, but her former society friends turned their backs on her. And by court order, half of Gray real estate's assets were returned to Eleanor. I've brought your coffee, President Gray. Eleanor turned around and smiled. Thank you, Teresa. She took a sip of coffee and returned to her desk. Now the president of Eleanor Gray Real Estate Development, her desk was covered with drawings for new projects. She was leading the company in a new direction to realize the dream of her father, Jonathan Gray, environmentally friendly housing development. The phone rang, and Eleanor picked up the receiver. Call from Mr. Robert Keene, her secretary announced. Put him through, please. Robert was an old friend of her father's whom Walter had estranged. After the trial, many of her father's old friends came to visit Eleanor. They told stories about young Jonathan Gray and spoke of how much Eleanor resembled her father. For her, it felt like recovering a piece of her lost past. After lunch, when Eleanor returned to the office lobby, there was an unexpected visitor waiting. It was Brittany. During the trial, Brittany had divorced Mark. After learning the truth about his wife's family, he said a relationship built on lies cannot continue. Brittany's relationship with her parents also deteriorated, and she eventually rented an apartment alone. She also lost her high-paying job and now works as an assistant at a small advertising company. Eleanor, she said in a small voice. Could we talk for a moment? The two entered Eleanor's office. From the window, they could see the Boston skyline. What is it? Eleanor asked quietly. I'm looking for a job, Brittany said directly. I was wondering if I could work for your company. Eleanor stared at her for a long time. I have experience in marketing, Brittany quickly added. And I'm prepared to start from scratch. Eleanor took out a document from her desk. Actually, I was thinking of expanding the marketing department. Hope lit up in Brittany's eyes. There is a job, Eleanor said. But we're no longer family. Brittany nodded slowly. I understand. This is purely a business relationship. A fresh start, Eleanor handed her the document. That evening, Eleanor returned to her new home in the suburbs. At the front door, her partner David and their 5-year-old adopted daughter Lily were waiting for her. Mommy's home. Lily exclaimed joyfully and ran to her. Eleanor picked up her daughter and kissed her on the cheek. David also approached and put his arm around Eleanor's shoulder. How was your day? He asked gently. It was a day of new beginnings, Eleanor smiled. As they entered the house, Eleanor thought to herself that a real family is not bound by blood, but by love and respect. She had finally found her true family.